Is it blissful to wake up from the illusory self-hypnosis? Now, that's a great title. Is it blissful to wake up from the illusory self-hypnosis? Yeah. Yeah, sometimes when I speak, words aren't always coming. So there's just silent speaking happening. Yeah. When I do these talks, I don't plan them. They're not something I sit and ruminate about or make notes. I really try to do these talks spontaneously and without a personal agenda, or for the personal agenda to be very thin, like ghost-like. Yeah. Which is maybe sounding a little weird to some people. You know, when I first got into this subject, I thought that the non-duality, or learning about non-duality or waking up, was an intellectual thing. I remember when I was younger, me and Roger, my partner at the time, Roger Castillo, we went to Arma's ashram, and I managed to get 5 hugs. I got a hug because I was a woman. I got a hug because I was a newcomer. I got a hug because I was going to leave. I got a hug because I was a young person. So I think I had a hug every day from Arma. And then I had a massive blowout for a whole day where there was just emptiness looking. It was spectacular, but I didn't even know that it was spectacular because there was just watching happening. And it was very blissful, but even the bliss wasn't exciting because there wasn't really something watching. And I associated it most probably to the living with Roger, the speaking with Roger, the understanding non-duality, or something I'd done, rather than actually being in Arma's presence. Because I was so convinced that awakening, or the movement of life, was a personal endeavor. For it to be an invisible appearance of something like being around somebody's energy and resonating with it, when I didn't even understand what they're talking about. I remember going to a talk on the beach and I was like, what is she even saying? I couldn't make sense of it. They translated it, but it just didn't make any sense to me. It wasn't like going to a non-duality talk where I could follow along with my imagination and be like, that makes sense. Yeah. There was such a conviction that I, the person, was in some way in control, even though it had been hammered, malleted over the head with non-duality and no doership. There was still a sense that it was me that was going to get something and understand something, release something and let something go, and then there would be a shift. Even though I was into all these different Indian traditions that talked about energy, I was really convinced it was some form of understanding, and then a shift. When I was convinced the whole of my life was like that. That me, the person inside, had to be in control and had to make things happen. I remember Wayne Lickerman, who was a student of Ramesh Balsekar. I remember going to a talk of his, actually before I met Ramesh and Roger. This was when I used to live in London. Maybe, yeah, 2003 or 4. And I remember him talking about being an alcoholic and then one day waking up and no longer being able to be an alcoholic anymore. And that he was mortified because he liked being an alcoholic and he didn't want to stop drinking. But something stopped him drinking. And I remember even in hearing that story, there was still a personification of it, that it was something to do with him. The idea that life was happening beyond him. Seemed like a nice idea, but it also seemed implausible. It was so convincing that my thoughts were driving the dream bus. So it's so convincing that I was moving my hand, I was making the mouth speak, I was looking out of the eyes, I was in control of the thoughts, because it comes really quickly. Like, I am going to speak. I don't want this. I do want that. I like this. I don't like that. So it seems so plausible that I was running this. And then what begins to happen when the emptiness is recognized more and more, or that becomes more permanent, is a deep seeing that speaking, looking, acting isn't actually coming from a centralized I. So although you seem to appear in a continuous pattern, like, you carry on acting American or English or Dutch or Irish. So you carry on behaving and acting in the familiar patterns of you. There isn't actually a centralized I there, which is doing everything. And this isn't an intellectual knowing. An intellectual knowing comes and goes. That's something that you teach yourself. And the intellectual knowing is helpful. It helps relax the mind. It helps the mind understand. But it's a deep seeing that there isn't a centralized I looking out of the eyes. And then at some point, there is a shift to that nothing is looking out. And then over the years, the body and the personality, that particular character, lines up more and more with that realization. So the character then begins to embody that more. That's my way of expressing it. The character doesn't exist as something but habits and conditions. So you could say the habits and conditions begin to align more and more with that. So where does the bliss come into it? Where does the bliss come into it? The Ananda, Sat Chit Ananda. So the recognition that there isn't a centralized I, and what's experiencing now is the unmanifest as consciousness. The consciousness is empty. Consciousness doesn't belong to anything. Consciousness is all things and no things. And this sense of existence, the sense that this is, you could say I am, but I don't mean I am something, but the sense of existence. It's like the heart of the unmanifest. And the realization of this, the movement back to this, is very blissful. But blissful is something that comes and goes. So blissful isn't a permanent state. It's an effect that happens through the body-mind in the recognition of this. And sometimes through the years, the body-mind moves more and more into bliss as the habits and the conditions line up more and more with the truth of who you are. And also throughout the day, the bliss will come and go dependent on what. So bliss isn't a fixed thing, it's a gradient which will appear. But generally, once that shift has happened, there's always a connection to this bliss or this peace. Even actually in really horrific circumstances. But it seems to express itself, for me anyway, more when there's less action happening. If there's too much bliss with things happening, it seems impossible to do anything. You know, you're trying to buy your baked beans at the supermarket. If there's too much bliss, then you're just like stuck. Yeah. And this isn't something that's talked about very much by Western teachers. In fact, it's often really talked down because of expectation. It's talked a lot more about by Indian teachers. It's interesting what happens in the West. Like, we diminish gurus. We diminish any positivity that non-duality has. It's like nothing changes. Everything's exactly the same. And it's often to do with superiority of creating, seeking. It's a funny, or the teacher acting superior. It's a funny dynamic. I understand the issue with guru because we have such a different society to Indian society. And so guru in Indian society, or a sadhu in Indian society, He's generally supported by the community, which really makes it a different relationship, whereas in more Western countries, it's really not supported by the community. In fact, it's really, you know, looked down upon. It's and then especially if a teacher charges money as well, it's even looked down upon more. It's interesting that, and then if the teacher says they have bliss, or that it was really like the shift was really loving or blissful, it's like, oh, they're evil. Not only do they charge money, not only do they have an ashram, but now they're saying they're just permanently happy or experiencing lots of bliss. What assholes. Yeah, it's funny that dynamic in the West. So a lot of teachers end up emphasizing, you know, still having pain or the evolution of the character, which is true, but my character releases and evolves, and old seeking patterns get seen and fall away, and it changes, and I can see it, all of that. But there is a bliss that comes with awakening, this fundamental sense of feeling at home and feeling good, of positivity, even when crying and releasing a difficult emotion. And that's just the way it is when there stops being this centralized I and nothing is looking. It's deeply relaxing. It's deeply freeing and loving for nothing to be looking. It is like the missing key, or the, you know, get out of jail free card. And it's amazing that it's emerged in certain cultures to be spoken about. That there is this way of undoing yourself back to the freedom. And the freedom is lost when there is the illusion of someone being built, that something is having an experience. And that something is built through seeking. Seeking, first of all, to be a body, a name, seeking to be good enough, seeking to be worse than, seeking to be happy, seeking to get things, seeking to avoid things. So some teachers call it different things, like desire. I tend not to call it desire because the body will have natural desire. We'll have desire to go to the toilet, desire to eat, desire to meditate, desire to walk, desire to dress. So there will be movements that it will have. But seeking is this added, where every desire is taken to be a person's, and then the person is trying to find a permanent state of happiness through that desire. So through eating, or through dressing, or through collecting things, or money. Like if I do all of these things, I will become free. I will become free. So the question always is, who are you prior to any thought, feeling, sensation, sound, smell, imagination? Who are you? Who experiences the body? Who experiences the sound? Who experiences the seeing? Who experiences the speaking? What is it that is looking out of the body now? Or who is it that's looking out of the body now? While there is seeking, this will be veiled. The seeking keeps the person going. And you can feel angry or bitter about the seeking, but it's very impersonal. And it cannot be stopped. You know, like the Wayne Nickerman, the Wayne Nickerman story. You know, if you've got the desire to have children, the seeking to have children, not the desire, the seeking to have children. So there's a you that believes that children will bring you completion. You might not be able to articulate that, but it'd be deep, deep in your body. And while that's deep in the body will act it out. It's a phenomenal game. Even if you try to deny it or repress it, it will find its way to keep trying to act that out. You know, if you've ever wanted a certain food or something, if you've ever wanted to do something, you know, you try to stop the desire, but the desire, often, you know, it's there, it's relentless, it keeps coming back. And when we're born into this life, we have a certain amount of karma of seeking. And every seeking comes down into two brackets: seeking for love, so seeking for pleasure, and seeking to avoid pain, which is fear. So it has these two polarities which is going between. And everyone has particular stories. So some might be more motivated by love, some more motivated by fear. And everyone's version of love will be different. Some versions of people's love is to be really famous. Some is to be really appreciated. Some is to be parents. And that has to be acted out in a way. Until it is seen that your true freedom is not found in any seeking, in anything. Anything. There is nothing which will free you. Doesn't mean you have to stop doing things. It doesn't mean you have to sit there and be a vegetable. This is deep knowing that that which is looking, non-duality, not two-ness, complete emptiness, the unmanifest, the true nature of everything is what's always being looked for. And this is absolute love. It's always been what's experiencing. But the illusory person, which is a phenomena which seems to only appear in humans, really believes that the completion of its seeking will give it what it wants. It's so strong. It's so strong. I must do this or I must do that. There is nothing you must do. It's here now. What seems to be needed for most people on this path is a reaping. No, what's that word when you prepare the soil? Reaping of the seeds? No, I don't think that's it. Forgot the saying. Sowing the seeds. No, it's when you prepare the soil beforehand. So before planting the seeds. So it's not you that's going to awaken. So the person always personifies everything. So it thinks, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I will awaken. I will do this, and then I will awaken. But actually, it's never going to be you that awakens. And so some non-duality teachers have a problem with giving any seeming prescription because the person takes it on as them arriving, them getting somewhere. And it seems to be that there has to be a calming of the body-mind mechanism. So when the body-mind mechanism is like really lost in illusion, there can just be a big pop suddenly. I have seen that, I've witnessed it, I've heard about it. But most of the time, there needs to be a settling down of the illusion. So intellectually understanding the illusion, intellectually having understanding the what's that word? The karma of the body-mind mechanism. So having a good conceptual basis of what your patterns are and your conditions are. A movement from being completely in the head to being embodied. So there's a recognition of emotions, sensations, and feelings. You're not just living through a mental interpretation. And a calming down of the system. A lot of people have hyperly aroused nervous systems. So calming of that down. So in India, there was these practices prescribed to meet these dynamics. And we also have added to that in the West. There's lots of different practices you can do to calm the person down. And I really recommend that, just with the precursor that, you know, the idea that you are doing it is an illusion. So Roger Castillo used to say, it sounds like I'm giving prescription, but actually I'm giving a description of what may or not happen. So whether or not there is a calming down of the system is down to God's will or life's will of what's happening. And then once the system is relatively calm, it seems then there's more possibility to drop out of mind into no mind. But it's not somebody dropping out, it's a movement from the identification with the body-mind, with the seeking, and then that collapsing, and then a realization of what's truly happening. That this is the unmanifest expressing. And then there is a movement to looking from the big consciousness, rather than the big consciousness seemingly sucked into a person and the personal awareness of moving in time. So there's movement back to the big consciousness and the sense of existence. So then there's looking from this place, and this is like empty and full simultaneously. It's like in the precipice between the emptiness and the fullness. Yeah. And then from that, bliss arises in the body-mind mechanism. And then normally through time, the body-mind mechanism, karma changes more and more to be in line with that. So even though you've worked on yourself a lot beforehand, afterwards, then the karma carries on changing to become more and more refined to that realization that everything is life's will. And that there's no separation between that which is experiencing and everything else. It's one and the same thing.